Amen. All right, everyone, welcome back to Nets in the Water. Today we are here with Courtney Tanis. Recently had on Nick Tanis, and now we have on, I'd say, the better half. I'll give it to you. I'm sure as a wife you wouldn't say that, but I'm going to give it to you, and if you say otherwise, we'll just cut your mic during it.
I will say that he is the better half. Actually, we equally balance each other.
Wow, what a correct answer.
Yes.
So Courtney Tanis is the admissions director over at St. Pete Catholic High School, married to Nick Tanis. That's about all I know of your story. I'm really excited to get to know more of your story. It was very fun when you came over with Hannah. We had kind of mentioned like, oh, we'll bring Courtney on the podcast. It worked out so well, and now I'm very excited to be able to have you on today. Thank you so much for coming on.
I'm going to pray for all of you.
This is very fun. No, this is going to be great.
It will be great. It will be great.
So I guess to open it up, what is your story? Were you raised Catholic? Did you have like a conversion later in life?
So I was not raised Catholic. I was actually raised Baptist. So,
okay.
Yes, I was born in Alabama, if you can't tell by the accent. And my parents separated when I was young. I grew up in the Panhandle, went to school at UCF, met my wonderful husband, as you've already mentioned, Nick, came to Tampa, and we were engaged and going through our sessions before getting married. And a part of that is you, of course, make the commitment that if you're going to marry in the Catholic Church, that you will raise your children Catholic. So I had the discussion with him and I said, well, I think I should go through the process of converting. And I will say that when I began that process of conversion, it was more out of just, going through the motions for my marriage. It was probably when I went into education, which happened just after we were married, that I really recognized that this faith was not just for the marriage, it was for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's really cool to hear like how the Lord works through like marriages, like through the sacraments. It literally is like in the sacrament you were able to be evangelized. So you converted, you got married. At the time, were you working in education?
No, I actually began my career working in nonprofit. Okay. For a brief time, I raised money for United Way, which eventually became United Way of Tampa Bay. And then I, being young, thought I want to get out of the not-for-profit and work for-profit. Very short career because it was not that long after 9/11. A lot of companies were having difficulty. And so 1 week after Nick and I were married, I was homesick, and my employer called me and said, you know what, don't worry about coming back. So I felt like we went through so many things in the span of a week of being married, in sickness, in love, and rich and poor. And so I ended up calling a friend of our family who was a teacher at Christ the King and had mentioned to her from a conversation with Nick that, I'd always thought about being an educator, but had not pursued that field of study in college because when I was going to UCF, they had a reoccurring theme of UCF stood for you can't finish. And I was adamant I'm going to finish in the 4 years, so I didn't want to change my degree to education. But Nick said, you know what, give it a try. So they didn't have a teaching position, which was probably the best thing. Instead, they had a teaching assistant position. And I became a teaching assistant with the help of Mrs. Fogarty and Sister Karen, who was a Salesian sister, and they were there at Christ the King at the time. And probably within a few months, I knew that I just loved being in the classroom. And from there, I went on to pursue my master's degree in elementary education. And then I just eventually kept doing many different things. And now here I am in admissions and enrollment.
What prompted the transition from the classroom to admissions? Because it feels like quite a switch up from like being in front of the students with them all day, every day to like more on the admin side of things.
Well, truth be told, I love being with the kids, but I felt like when I was in a classroom, I taught in self-contained classrooms. I also taught in middle school for a short time, so I did have the opportunity to teach with different grade levels. However, I felt like I had talents that were not being fully utilized in the classroom. And so I wanted the opportunity to be able to be out among the school, but not necessarily trapped in a classroom. And I hate to say trapped because, you're not trapped with kids. You know, it's a gift to be with them. However, I just felt like there was so much more that I was called to do. And in fact, I did try to pursue other opportunities, and I would always be the top one or two candidates, not one or two, because if I was one, I would have been hired, but I was always a top candidate. However, I just never did get those positions outside of a school environment. I kid you not, there would be 100 people applying for a job at a school, and who would get the job? I would get the job. And so when it came time, I really prayed hard, and I said, you know, God, please, I need something different. I need something to help me feel re-energized and really love what I do. And so an opportunity came open, and it's really hard to get outside of a classroom position. You're oftentimes just kind of like stereotyped for being able to do certain things. And so my current, well, he's now the president of the school, but he was the principal at the time, Ross Booballs. He, everybody calls him Mr. B. He was fortunate enough to give me a chance, and here I am almost 3 years later.
Wow.
So.
Now, do you think that your time in the classroom is what, like, does that inform how do you do admissions and enrollment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my being a classroom teacher probably helps me be so much better at this job, especially with helping educate parents about their decision-making process for choosing a high school, because I have been from elementary to middle school, and I can assure them that what we're providing at our high school, and really, I have to say that our diocese is really very fortunate. We have phenomenal schools in this area to choose from. And I will speak to them about my experiences, and I will assure them that, you know, we're going to continue what they have instilled in them in those elementary and middle schools in the high school level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like being able to have that confidence, like, firsthand, definitely, it bolsters your confidence in what you're selling, like, as a promoter of the school. So, I mean, I think it's a little more self-explanatory how you live out the mission of Catholic education in a classroom with students. How did that transition to admissions? I feel like I have a hard time conceptualizing how in admissions you're like evangelizing to the children. Or are you more maybe putting them in the position to be evangelized?
I will tell you, there are probably so many opportunities to be able to evangelize. I will tell you that there are oftentimes when I have a family member call, and, you know, they'll oftentimes inquire, do you have to be Catholic? You know, we don't require you to be Catholic. We will also have people call and say, I am Catholic, however, I am not practicing. And that will lead me into a conversation that, you know, maybe this is the Holy Spirit whispering to you to return to the church. And I will always take that opportunity there to mention that to the families. And then when they're non-Catholic families, what I try to encourage them is to understand that you will have faith here, part of your child's education every day, and that we will learn how to be good people, how to walk like Christ. And sometimes we're going to politely agree to disagree on where we stand, because the Catholic Church is not changing, and we are unapologetically Catholic at the school where I work. And, you know, they all know that up front. With the kids, I feel like you had Hannah on here before. It is knowing the kids. Like, I love it when families come in and have tours, and I will work so hard to remember the students' names and really get to know their interests. And that was something I felt like was a strength of mine in the classroom, is knowing the child, especially knowing what they desire to do post high school, because then I can help carry that over in my conversations with them every day. I am a firm believer that student success in a high school is getting involved. And so if I know that a child is passionate about reading, then I will direct them to places where they can focus on the love of reading. And then if I know a child has talents with singing, then of course I'll encourage them to be a part of the theater group. Maybe, you know, they have never even attempted to do a sport. Well, let's try a sport that maybe doesn't involve right now as much competitive skill level. And it's always awesome to see them shine and cheer them on. I love being a cheerleader. I think, you know, and some people will refer to me as a cruise director too. So because you're always trying to create a fun atmosphere, not just for the students, but for the teachers too, and for the parents. It's a domino effect. If your teachers are happy, then your students are happy. If your students are happy, then they go home and they tell their parents. If the parents are happy, then they will spread the good news to the community as well.
And that all falls under what you do as an admissions director?
Yes.
Or just kind of what you do at the school also? Like
it's what I do. I think if you're a good admissions director, then that's what you should be doing, is you should be out among the students, really getting to know them, because it also helps when you're bringing people on the campus and walking through the halls. Like, I encourage every family to come to our campus and visit, because I say, you can come to a discovery night, you can come to an open house, but that's really, when schools are rolling out the red carpet, it is really going to be beneficial for you to come to a campus during the day, because you get to see how we interact with the students, how we are engaging with them, addressing them by name, and, what are their behaviors. Even like I will, people get nervous, but I'll bring them when we're having transitions between classes, because I want them to see what it's like for their child to go from like a smaller school atmosphere to what they would define as a bigger one, but it's not quite as big as several other schools in our area. So,
yeah, I mean, it's also, I think that confidence speaks for what you do as an admissions director, of like you believe in what you're doing. You have like an actual confidence that what you're doing for these students is good, founded on the truth of the gospel and the truth of like their faith. What do you think it takes to get there? Because I like maybe a good follow-up or leading question that is like, were you always that confident in your school and what you guys are providing, or is that something that you came to be confident in, or something that you helped create that you're confident in?
There is something good in every school. And no matter where I have worked, I have always found the good.
Yeah.
And so I think when you know that there is good and great things happening, then you will confidently go out and shout it from the mountaintops.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Dang, what was I just about to ask?
Well, my question to you is, you went to Catholic school.
I did.
So did you go to Catholic school your whole life?
No, I went to public school for kindergarten through like second grade.
And
so
then,
essentially my whole life.
So did your parents make the choice when you went from public school to private school?
Yes. My sister graduated elementary school. And she was transitioning to a Catholic school for middle school. And my parents were like, well, we may as well just put him in the same place so we don't have to drive to two different schools. It's be easier.
And then when you were going from like middle school to high school, did you also have a stake in the decision-making process? Or
I wanted to go to Jesuit for high school since I was 7 years old.
Okay.
I was 7, and there was a guy at my summer camp who said that he had to wear a suit and tie to school. And I wanted that. So I wanted to go there for years. So my parents knew where I wanted to go, and they were happy about it. Like there was no pushback from them about going to Jesuit for years.
Awesome.
Yeah, which was a great experience. Like, it definitely speaks to what you were saying about like being confident in it, to the point of like, no, just come and see it. Like, I don't need to roll out a red carpet. I don't need to show you the best of it. Like, the best of it is the day to day. The best of it is what we're doing here. And yeah, and that's what allows the freedom for you to be a good admissions counselor. Because like, it takes that team around you to make a great school for you to be able to do your job well.
Exactly. I mean, and we have at our school a wonderful team. And I think that's the other beautiful thing about Catholic schools is so many of them are small, but very mighty. You have people that are there for the sake of it. They're not doing this work for the money. So they're doing the work because they know it is what God's called them to do.
Now, what do you think are the through lines you've seen of not even successful, but just like truly good people in the admin side of a Catholic school? Like, what does it take to work kind of in the office, but still be like good at being a Catholic educator?
Well, what's really difficult for me is that I feel like my husband is a phenomenal leader. I'm biased. I have my wife goggles on. I think you have to be able to humble yourself. I think you have to be able to admit you're wrong. I think you also need to put the students first in your decision-making process. The students need to come first. It's not about me. What's in the best interest of the students? And sometimes that's really difficult for families to grasp when we're making these difficult decisions, whether it be, admitting a student or asking a student to leave, or even, day-to-day decisions at the school. I think also that you need to find joy in your work. I think when you lack joy, then the work, when it's no longer fun, you don't produce the same results.
Yeah. So to kind of take it step by step there, you mentioned you need to be humble. You need to admit you're wrong. You need to, don't tell me. This is the one that I had a question about. Put the students first. I really want to dive into the putting students first, particularly with are there any examples of a time or things that you've had to do, either on maybe not on a student level, but on a more corporal level, of decisions you've made for larger things that were difficult, putting the students first? What does that look like? I don't really know what it would mean in terms of an admissions thing.
Well, from an admission standpoint, putting the students first, I believe that oftentimes each school knows what it would take for a child to be successful at their school. There's an application process at high schools. And so when a family submits their application to a school, it can sometimes be difficult for us, especially if we have to tell that family no. But what we're doing is we're putting what's in the best interest of the student first. We don't want to set them up for failure. We want to have them be set up for success. And unfortunately, so many Catholic schools don't have the same resources as other schools do. And so we would just not want to do a disservice to a family. And that can be really difficult.
Now, what would you say to someone who's kind of in the camp of, and I can't, it's maybe a whisper in my head, how is the school able to know what is best for the student more than the parents would? Because in my mind, it would be if a parent is having a kid apply there, they want their kid to go there, the parent would know their kid and what was best for their kid more than a school would. But I'm sure there's a disconnect there. But yeah, what would you say to that?
The answer, I feel like, that is, I would hope an obvious answer is, it's not part of God's plan. Let's think about when, post high school, you're applying for all these different colleges. The advice that I gave my child and the advice that I give the students that I work with every day is, God has a plan for you. He will open the doors for places that he feels that his plan will start to unfold. And so I feel like that's the best answer, is that, if we have not been able to offer, or if a school is not offered to offer admissions at that time, it's not that we don't love your child. It's not that, anyone's done anything wrong. Just for whatever reason, it's just not part of God's plan at this moment in time.
And now, in order to be able to enact that, like follow God's plan for things, you need to have good discernment, which would come from a pretty robust personal spiritual life. Have you seen that play out? Have you seen people where it's pretty much a 1-to-1 of the more holy they are, the more active in their faith they are, the better they are at this job?
Well, I try to put my trust in God in my position as much as possible. Admissions, schools rely on enrollment and admissions, probably about 80 to 85% of their budget. And so that's a lot to weigh on a person that, people's livelihoods depend on what you're doing. So I have to put my trust in God. When applications open up, I know for our school, I will begin praying that, not so much let's meet a certain amount of numbers of students to be here, but please call the people that are meant to be here.
Yeah, like it's rooted in prayer.
Yes. So, and I think when you put your trust in him, so much good will come from that. And I feel like that's one thing that's been on, our side, helping us be so successful in the last few years, especially since we've had a wonderful team all come together at the school I'm working at, is because so many of us are putting our trust in him. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, when a school puts their trust in him, again, you just, all the things fall into place.
Yeah. Because I also feel like in a similar way the educator is, but I guess in even more of a direct way in what you do in admissions or in just general admin work at a high school or a Catholic school, you're like very directly an agent of God's will, like very clearly an instrument of like what the Lord has in store for this person. Like it is literally your job to be doing things that align with the will of the Lord. Has there been like any difficulty for you in maybe, I don't want to say accepting it, but yeah, and like there's like, I feel there's a lot of pressure in that. Like there's a lot of heft to like doing the Lord's will in such an explicit way.
I think just getting here to this position, it was very difficult for me because, as I shared, there were often times where I was trying to seek different opportunities outside of education, and he just kept coming back to me saying, this is not my plan. And then when I now am in this role, I look back and I think, wow, I was so foolish. I thought that I was right. I kept trying to steer the path of what I thought I should do. And he kept saying, no, stay in this path. I will assure you, this is what I need you to do. Mm-hmm. Had I not had the experiences that I've had, I don't think that I would be able to succeed at my work now. Because as you talked about, I have had classroom experience. I've worked in an elementary setting. I've worked in a middle school setting, and I am able to bring that along with me to my job. And it was very difficult for many years. My husband had to listen to me come home and, complain or gripe or sometimes cry. And then now I get in the car and I drive to work, and my drive is from Tampa to St. Petersburg, and I get to drive over water. It's very calming. The sun is rising in my rearview mirror, and I think, wow, thank you.
Wow.
So I don't.
No, that's. I mean, first off, you might be the first person I've ever heard say that driving to St. Pete is calming for them, but it's beautiful. It's awesome, though.
I know. I get. I get so many people. Oh gosh, the commute. How can you tolerate that? I say it's not that bad. Plus, I use the morning drive often to pray, to try to get myself in a good place. And then the drive home is an opportunity for me to oftentimes check in with family.
Oh, nice.
So.
Yeah, I mean, if you use it right as well. Like, I also would imagine that a school hour, it's not as, you're not really like peak traffic hours. Although maybe you are actually, because you probably get there early, stay there late. So.
Yes. And that's one thing with any administrator for any grade level, you are working long hours. Mm-hmm. So yes, our days usually start before sunrise and oftentimes end close to sunset.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's the work of the Lord. You're doing it. You're running is to win. Today's readings.
Yes.
The kind of the rejections along the path to you getting to where you are. Mm-hmm. Because it's cool to me that other people did what you're doing now in order to get you in this position of God's will. Mm-hmm. That like all those people also had to make the hard decisions that you have to make to say no to you. Mm-hmm. And you had to go through the difficulty of like hearing no and being rejected and moving down. And all of them in that chain did that so the Lord's will could be enacted for you to be where you are now. Mm-hmm. It's just a really cool, it's a cool domino effect.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I also use those rejections to speak to students because, you know, you see students on a daily basis trying to accomplish, you know, going out to be like the president of a class or, you know, being the captain of a team or, you know, getting the A on the test and just telling them that, you know, it's okay. You know, you have to have some of these rejections or sometimes the things that you think you want not happen because then there's something better for you. And had I not had those experiences, then I couldn't, you know, be able to speak to the students, speak to my own kids. Yeah,
it's like the prodigal son, like the parable of the son running away. You just get to be there to tell them, like, no, you don't want that. Like, you don't want to turn away from the Lord. You don't want this alternate life path. Like, the Lord is the one who you're seeking. And having someone in such a corporate level of leadership at a school is such a blessing for your community. I'm sure that you are actively invested in the mission of Catholic education. Because I think, at least from my perspective, it's easy to think of like the front office people at a Catholic school as like just regular employees, and like the teachers are evangelists and the teachers have this spiritual calling, but the people up at the front office just kind of are like business people. Like they don't really have as much of a spiritual calling, which is definitely incorrect. Like that's an untrue thought.
Right.
But I think it's a temptation of a lot of people outside of Catholic education.
Yes. I mean, I think, you know, they forget that in the front office, you do have daily interactions with the students, but you also have to work harder to have those interactions with the students. Because I can get caught up in doing desk work and phone calls and emails and then forget I need to go out into the school. I need to check in with the students, and others can do the same. The other thing that we oftentimes do working in an office is you will go out and you will check on the teachers because, as you mentioned, they're with the students every day, all hours of the day, and check on them, make sure they're doing okay. And I oftentimes find myself, you know, hearing things that they may be concerned about and bringing those back to others in the office so that we can hopefully address them so that they don't get burned out.
Yeah, all of this continues to just point back to me that like the importance of a robust personal spiritual life, like within Catholic education. I feel like it's just the more I've been talking to Catholic educators, the more it's been like, dang, like you guys are beasts in the classroom. Like you're doing what you need to do, administration, all this work, but also like the unsung reality that like all of these people need to be and are like so firm in their faith in order to do these things. Because like it sounds like a lot of pressure. It sounds pretty scary. And you mentioned that, like you said, what 80% of the school's budget is in admissions. Did I hear you said like that's crazy. From the admissions perspective, what do you think? I think I asked the through line of people in admissions, but I think just of schools in general, because you have this perspective that's not a little bit, but it is like higher level than teachers at the school. What do you think are the common factors of like schools that are just solid, that are doing what they need to be doing in terms of like, just like, I think the business side of things, like the admin side of things, there's still such a gray cloud in my head over what a school office does. And like, how do they do it well?
Well, you have to have great leadership. Great leadership will have other great leaders working with them. And I also think great leadership will recognize that they don't have to micromanage people. Like if you have other wonderful leaders working with you, that the work will get done. So, you know, I take Nick, for example. He knows that when he leaves his school, it will still run successfully because there are phenomenal people working at the school. So, and I can say the same for the school where I work, that the work will get done. When I'm not there, there are amazing men and women there that will carry out what needs to be done to keep our high school running successfully.
Yeah, I think like having those like systems in place, it gives you the freedom to do what you're doing well. Like the job of an admissions director, or the job of like a fundraiser, or the job of a secretary becomes so much easier when you have like a good school or like a good organization. Like you're free to be able to do your job well.
I think you also have to be prepared to embrace change. That you need to be forward thinking too. You can't be stagnant and have the attitude of, well, this is the way we've always done it. I think you need to be ready to accept what's to come. I know, for example, like our school is last year, they were not, AI was, the new thing, and they were very hesitant to use it in the classroom. And now we've embraced it. Now how can we teach our students to use AI responsibly? So, and even the teachers as well. How can you use it to help not have burnout?
Yeah, it's been, I like using it sometimes too. It's nice. What other examples are there of like, you kind of already answered this, but I am curious, like when you say embracing change, what does that look like from your perspective as an admissions director? Because for a teacher, embracing change is like, oh, this year we have iPads. This year we're using AI. But how does your job change? Or does it maybe? Maybe it just doesn't.
Well, I think like in my role, like when I came to the school, and several schools still have just the practice of we do a campus tour, you fill out an application, you get a notification, yes, you're coming, or no, you're not. Whereas having been a classroom teacher, one thing that I recognized, it's too much for these students and the families to start thinking and waiting until actually their 8th grade year to make a decision of going on to a high school. So when I came into this role, one of my goals was to start inviting families and students on at an earlier age, because they need to feel comfortable in a high school environment. So many of them have been in a school for probably 10 years time. And this is going to be a huge change for them, leaving their home away from home and then going to high school where they'll only be there for about 4 years. And so, and that 4 years goes by so fast. And so we want to make sure that they're comfortable. So, I started doing, a lot of new events. The other thing is that when you're working in admissions, you have to be creative in how you market yourself. And so as far as like embracing change and being forward thinking, you have to start to think about what are the trends, what are appealing to the younger students. So, social media, I oversee our school's social media accounts. So, we've tried to, of course, highlight things in photographs, but of course, short videos are fun. So we try to get a little more creative and show a little bit of ourselves through reels and that sort of thing. So,
So you mentioned earlier how important it is for people on the business side of things to be humble, to kind of admit when they're wrong. Where have you seen that play out, like in your own life? I'm curious of like just examples of that. I guess mostly like the humility, like where do those temptations lie for like someone in business admin work at a Catholic high school?
To be humble?
Like the temptations against humility.
Well, I have to work on this because, when you see your school succeeding and you know that you were instrumental in that, sometimes I have to take a step back and say, it wasn't just me, it was a team. I was just one of many that did this. And so I think that is where, if you want to be good at what you do, you need to remember that it's not just you that's making things successful. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's funny you bring that up because I think Hannah and I were just talking about this a couple weeks ago when we were filming. Was like, how do you find the balance between, like, yes, you worked hard, like you put in the hours, you got there before sunrise, you left at sunset, like you did do work, but also not like become prideful in it. Because I also think there's something bad about like pretending like you didn't do anything. Like there's also like the other side of pride where it's like you just like think so little of yourself, like, oh, I didn't even do anything good. Where it's like, no, like you did. Like, you made that family feel welcomed, and you did it on behalf of the Lord, and you did it with this team of yours. But you still did it. Like, it was still good work that came from you. How have you found balancing that? Like, how are you able to balance those things?
Prayer.
Yeah.
I just, it's not easy balancing it, but it's something I have to constantly work at every day. And, I'm very fortunate to have a very supporter. I am very fortunate to have a supportive spouse, someone who I can come home to and talk to and help me if I'm struggling, to be able to see the good if I'm having a bad day, or celebrate the moments that maybe I didn't feel like were celebrated enough.
A crucial part of a successful or just a thriving personal fulfillment and commitment is like the community around you. Is like, I mean, even for teachers who aren't married or who maybe don't have as supportive of a spouse, where like it takes a school community that is proud of themselves, that feels good about what they're doing, that points to the Lord and is humble, but is also like able to recognize the good of what's going on. Like, I feel like it necessitates that. Is that something that you found? Like, do you think that's true, that like a supportive school community of faculty and of teachers is kind of necessary?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, one thing we do at our school is we strive to have mission moments, like share the good news among ourselves so that we can, celebrate the successes, whether it's in the classroom with students or up in the front office. We try to do that on as many occasions as we can. I mean, pretty much every meeting when we get together, we, will celebrate, all the good that's happened. And
yeah, no, I mean, it's so necessary, because I feel like the evil one too just so frequently wants us to forget the good things happening. And under the guise of humility, under the guise of despair, whatever it is, but he's like, oh no, be humble. Like, don't think about that. It's like, no, it's a good thing. Like, admissions was good this year. Great. Like, be happy about that. Yeah, it's such a necessary part of staying close to the Lord. Another just pure curiosity question for me. How competitive is the admissions at your school? Is it highly, like, I don't know anything about the admissions.
It is certainly becoming more competitive across the Tampa Bay. I mean, I know for ourselves, so this is my third year working at the school that I'm at. And so of course everyone's data driven. And so I'm able to now compare numbers of, how many applications we received when we opened up, month by month. And just for example, this week, our applications opened up on Sunday. We have already acquired the same amount of applications in just under a week that we did in a full month last year. Actually, we've surpassed what we did in the previous 3 years.
Wow.
So, and I know that it's not just for us, it's for all the other schools as well.
Yeah. Totally.
A lot of it has to do with the families being able to afford a private school education if the school accepts the state scholarship that we have here in Florida.
Yeah, the new vouchers, correct?
It's a scholarship.
Scholarship. What is that? I don't even know what that is.
So there's two different types of scholarships in the state. We have the Florida Empowerment Scholarship that is for any student, regardless of income, to be able to apply towards education. They have like an education spending account. If they opt to go to a private school, then that money would then, of course, be applied towards their tuition. And then there is also a scholarship that allows you to have a little more funding. It's for students that have what they would define as unique abilities. And usually it's because students will have perhaps maybe some greater need and they would need more resources. And so that money then, of course, will be applied towards the tuition. If they're not going to a private school, then it is my understanding they can use these education funds to help with tutoring, therapies.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, but not all schools accept the state scholarship.
Gotcha. But that's causing increased admissions though, throughout
Absolutely.
the state.
Absolutely. I mean, I know our diocese had someone right now whose whole purpose is to help get the word out that this scholarship is available for families. I was blown away. I've gone the past 2 years to a conference up in Boston, and it is to allow educators from Catholic schools across the country that work in admissions and also in advancement to come in. And I was, again, shocked when I'm on this, event, and there were a number of people that worked in the state of Florida. And I even overheard, well, actually, I was having a conversation with another person and asked her where their children went. And, she was saying, oh, they go to a public school. And I said, well, do you have any area Catholic schools? And she said, well, unfortunately, I just can't afford it. And I said, well, what about with the scholarship? And she was like, what are you talking about, scholarship? And I said, you work in the state of Florida and you are not familiar with this scholarship? So then she was like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to look into that. Yeah. So, yes, it's been great. It's been great.
Yeah. While we're on this topic, can you please just get me excited about Catholic schools admissions? Because I feel like I'm so sick of hearing that, like, admissions are down, enrollment is down, Catholic schools are struggling. And that's just not what I'm hearing from educators and your admissions more directly. Like, it looks good. Things sound good.
Well, I have to say I've mentioned earlier, our diocese is phenomenal in my opinion. It's the only diocese that I've known, because I converted to Catholicism, and this is, where I've pretty much been here for 20 plus years. However, I know that when I go to these conferences and I meet other people, we are, again, very fortunate. We have, just a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of young families, and the state scholarship does work to our advantage.
Totally.
And does help with enrollment in all areas. So states that do have some type of assistance being provided to help offset the cost for attending a Catholic school definitely are seeing the enrollment numbers go up. Those that don't have it probably may be having some struggles.
And I think there's so many Catholic schools that are like just undergoing such positive transformations. Like things, I mean, from building renovations to new programs, even to stuff like the mural at your school. Like that's a really cool thing. That's just like a sign that like things are cool. Things are good. Like things are thriving.
Well, and you have to do that. Again, you have to be continuously showing that you're making improvements, because if you're asking people to invest money in you, then you need to be able to show them that we are going to take that money that they're investing and we're going to do good with it. So,
yeah, I think that's part of building the trust of the parents, which you do through genuinely caring for students and caring about your spiritual life and doing the Lord's will. Like all of those things point to the actual mission of Catholic schools to evangelize the students, to advance the kingdom of God through the school. It's just so important. And so it's a very cool step, I think, of the process that is easy to forget. Because I think at least myself, when I think of Catholic schools, so quickly jump to the student is in the classroom. Now what do we do? But there's a whole world of things that have to happen before that student sits down in the classroom to even get them into the classroom. That like that you're helping me be privy to. Like there's a whole ecosystem of like getting the student to that point, and then from there, someone like Hannah can come in, who was here a few weeks ago, and but it isn't until that point that Hannah can really be Hannah. Like you free her up to be able to do that through caring so much for these students before they even get there.
Well, and going back, one thing that I was thinking about as you were talking is that so many families will just naturally think that we're going to send our children to Catholic schools, especially for elementary and middle, but it's even harder work for high school admissions because we have to encourage them to continue Catholic education. Many will think that, okay, I have a strong foundation. It's time to, go out into the real world. And it's my job and others to be able to encourage them to not stop with the Catholic education, to continue it.
Yeah. Especially because there's nothing more real than the Lord and the faith. Like, I've always you struck a nerve. Like, I've always gotten so frustrated when people are like, oh, like, what about the real world? It's It's like, if I didn't think it was real, then why would I be following it? Like, it is the real world.
Right. I mean, we are exposed to so many different things outside of the school. I think it's just a wonderful opportunity, again, for us to be able to have Christ as the center of our education. I think the other thing to think about is, well, talking about data, like just the other day, we were looking at the data of students that attended non-Catholic schools versus those that attended Catholic schools you have to take a high school placement test. And our students that went to Catholic schools prior to being admitted to our school, they have had better performances on standardized testing. So, I think that's something else to, celebrate, is that our Catholic schools are just doing a great job of providing a solid education to all of their students.
Yeah. It's almost like it's founded on truth or something. Who would have thought? I wanted to close off with, if I came to you tomorrow and I was like, Courtney, I want to be in Catholic school admissions, or even more generally, I just want to do admin work at a Catholic school.
Okay.
What do I need? I'm still asking this. What do I need to do to be good at that? What steps do I need to take to be able to do it well? How would you answer it? What would be your, I've been asking this. I like putting a little number to it. Like, what would be your 3-step, 5-step program for how to not make yourself, but be good at Catholic administration work at a Catholic school?
I don't know if I can give you 3 steps, but I guess I could tell you what I've done.
It could be any number, or it doesn't have to be a number, but just like, what is your concrete list of, like, I feel like I think I started this with Nick's podcast where he was like, step 1, take silence through your day. Like, step 2, like, recenter yourself. Like, these sorts of practical things that we can do to leave with. Like, what are those practical things you've seen be helpful?
Well, I love Encora Impara. I am always learning. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Encora Impara?
Encora Impara. Ancora Impora. I am always learning in Latin. Okay. Oh gosh. I think the biggest takeaway for me has been to continuously be open to learning. I came into this position, of course, I was fortunate enough to have a background in education, but I also have a communications degree. That's where it all started, even though it was a very short time. And I have had no issue whatsoever picking up the phone and calling people who are in this position outside of the area and just asking questions. What are you doing that makes it work at your school? And taking those ideas and using them to where they would fit at our school. Oh gosh. I don't feel like I'm answering your question though.
No, I think that is like a clear step 1 is like always be ready to learn more and to adapt. It's not, I mean, that alone dispels for me something I kind of thought, where it was like, oh, well, it's a little more like at an office job, desk job at a Catholic school, you can be more like consistent, more stagnant in your day to day. But like from what you're saying, like that's not really the case. Like it's always changing, and you always have to be ready to kind of pivot and move on to the next thing.
Right. And I think for a school to be successful is they can't always get too comfortable. Because I think when you become too comfortable, then you become vulnerable.
Totally.
Because all the other schools are working really hard to get up to maybe that school's level. And there's going to come a time where, they've become so comfortable that they have now scrambled of, oh goodness, now we have to look at these other schools as a competitor. Yeah,
or before it wasn't the case. Okay, so always be ready for change.
Be ready for change. Be ready to learn.
Okay.
And pray. I mean, I think you just have to put your trust in God because He'll take care of you. He'll make things right, even when you feel like it's all going wrong. And just be patient. Oh, that's so hard. Being patient.
Where do you see patience play out with like the admissions stuff?
Oh, when you're knowing that you need to be at a certain number of enrolled students and you have those one or two families that are, still discerning about what they do. And you're like, I know that we will be the right place for your child. Just do it. So.
Yeah. So ready to learn, be patient, pray.
Yes.
It feels like a pretty solid trifecta. It feels like exactly what anyone would need to.
I think that you need those for all professions.
Yeah.
So
that's probably fair.
No,
I think that's it's all very good insight, because I think it's such a hidden corner of Catholic education. Like, we don't really think about the admissions director or the operations person or like the accountant, like these roles that very much are working for the kingdom and making God manifest. Like, they can't do these things without these roles. Excuse me.
Yes.
But they're so, like, it feels hidden. Like, we don't really talk about it ever. So I appreciate the insights into it, that it's such a living, breathing thing. It's such a always changing facet of Catholic education that is like the foundation of it. Like, without a good admissions process, you could have the greatest teachers in the world, and if you don't have someone in admissions getting kids into school, then like, what's it all for?
I was just thinking about the operations staff, and then even the cafeteria staff. Those are people too that are just a random thought. I think about like Nick, two of the departments that he always becomes close with, and I've done this myself, is the people who take care of the facilities, and then the people who feed you and the students, because without those, I don't think the school would run properly.
Yeah,
it's very random. But.
No, but it's like, it's these cornerstones of the community that are so unsung. They're so like, oh, that's the janitor. That's the cafeteria person. But then it's like, no, like, these are people who are working for the kingdom of God, who love these students in a very particular way.
And they love the school. Like, our person who's in charge of our operations went to the school, went on and actually had a technology degree that they earned, and then came back and worked the technology side of the school, and then now has become head of operations and works tirelessly to make sure teachers are comfortable, to make sure that we're comfortable, to make sure that things look, clean and neat and nice. And oh gosh, he's just wonderful. And it's the same to be said, I know, at many other schools. I can't thank them enough for doing what they do, because they're just wonderful people. So, and the same for our cafeteria people. They're awesome. They work so hard. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I just love all the people at school.
No, I mean, that's fair. And the same also goes for you. I'm definitely inspired to hear someone who takes the mission of their job so seriously, especially when I think it could be easy to separate mission from like making a phone call or sending an email. But you're so in touch with it that I think it's really inspiring, and I've really appreciated the chance to learn more about it and to get to talk with you.
Well, I hope you will go back to your alma mater and say thank you to the person who helped get you into that school, because it wasn't just an application. There was a lot of work and time that went into it. And ultimately, it was God's plan for you to get there.
Yeah, praise God. I'm happy for it. My high school experience was amazing. I loved it. So
yes,
yeah,
that's awesome.
And providing it for students is such a gift. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, listen, I love it.
All right. Well, we have a thing to end off every podcast. We'll clap at the same time.
Okay.
So we are out.